Hello everyone, my name is Ivory, your moderator this morning, and be welcome to this webinar dedicated to the release of a groundbreaking study of special economic zones in Africa conducted by Dalberg. The global consulting firm has researched an innovative SEZ economic impact model elaborated by Pan-African developer and operator Arise Integrated Industrial Platforms, usually called Arise IIP. And today, for the very first time, we shall find out what were the key objectives and methodology of this trailblazing research, and thus achieve a better understanding of the global economic impact of SEZs. As a reminder, there are currently over 200 special economic zones all over the continent, including, of course, the GCEZ in Gabon, which is one of the most robust and is well documented by this study, as you shall see very shortly. And such an objective level of research on those special zones had never been conducted before. At a time where the continent urgently needs post-COVID to tap and maximize its economic potential, well, this conversation today is pertinent forever. And to discuss, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome here our esteemed guests and experts, and they are Bavin Vyas, Group Head of Environmental and Social Governance at Arise, all the way from Kigali, Boyekanyo Motibatsela, Associate Partner at Dalberg, and sadly his colleague Anikal Jamal, who's Regional Director for Dalberg's Advisors European Business and founder of the Dalberg's London office, can no longer join us this morning, but of course Boyekanyo will be representing Dalberg. And last but certainly not least at all, we are with Mais Mouissi, Chief Economist at Mais Mouissi Consulting. Ladies and gentlemen, please note that this webinar will be, as you can hear, conducted in English. And for all our French participants, you can access our translation service. All you need to do is choose the right channel at the bottom of your screen. Another very important tab this morning, of course, is the Q&A, because we want to hear from you, the audience. We want to hear what you have to say, and we want you to contribute to this discussion. And to do so, please send all your questions using this tab, the Q&A, and we'll do our best to address these questions at the end of our session. And now it is my absolute pleasure to kickstart this discussion with the Chief Environmental and Social Government Officer at Arise, Mr. Bavin Vyas. Bavin oversees the sustainability of the company's operations and the creation of shared value for all stakeholders. Bavin has worked in more than 25 countries, and that's across Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and of course Africa. And his 20 years experience covered 15 years in the UK, in UK Impact Assessment Consulting, and an impressive 6 years with Arise in Africa. Bavin holds a master's degree in environmental and social policy. Let's welcome him. Hello, Bavin.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today. So to set the scene, could you please say a few words about Arise's activities to support industrialization across the African continent, and why, we would like to know, why did Arise feel the need to conduct this study?
Okay, thank you. So I think as you have briefly introduced, Arise is a Pan-African industrial ecosystem service provider. Now we have a mandate to industrialize Africa, and the way we have structured, we have taken an ecosystem service approach. We do complete DPFO model. So we design, build, operate, and finance SEZ. The purpose of SEZ is to transform the raw material that used to export without getting it processed, and manage the import substitution. So Arise founded in 2010 in the name of Jesus to transform one sector in one country. With the tremendous hard work of all the key members of Jesus, over a period of 10 years, we managed to attract close to 16 countries in terms of foreign direct investment and more than 140 industries with $1.2 billion of capital invested. With this success, there was a natural need to transport and scale our business model into nearby countries. Also, there was a lot of desire and interest to see that if we can scale this up and transport this model into other countries. While we were thinking of doing that, there were a lot of questions that came into play. That is it scalable? Is it replicable? What are the real impact that model has created? So at that time we started searching. At that time we were also exploring the Benin and Togo, and at that time we were searching that is there any model available who explains the true economic impact of SEZ. And we found there are a few models available, but they are not bespoke and customized to SEZ. There are models available, but they don't represent Africa flavor, Africa socio-economic culture and context, which led to one big question that is this a right time to build this model and give something back to society? Because I think SEZ is not the new concept, but only few SEZ have been successful, and Gabon is one of them. So we thought using Gabon case study, let's create the model. So that was the one objective. I'm coming back to your second question. What are the objective of the study? So one objective is to create the model which was absent in the market. Second model, we work in a public-private partnership. And fundamental tenet of partnership is a transparency. So we wanted to share all the impact that we have created with the host government with whom we are partnering. So another objective of doing this model, can we create a transparent model that is available in public domain? We can show our impact real time, and then and that gives the confidence to our partner that all the energy and effort and investment put into developing SEZ has a long-term strategic economic value. Third objective of developing this study is how do we communicate and motivate the entire ecosystem and all the non-state stakeholder, whether it's our lender, whether it's our investors, whether our colleagues, our employees, our contractor, our supplier, even the host countries and the people who are invested in the journey of Arise. So this model gives us an opportunity to feedback that with all our cumulative effort and all our cumulative work, we managed to create this particular impact in each country. More than that, we also felt that we don't want to restrict ourselves disclosing impact. We also want to disclose the methodology that derived the impact, which again takes the transparency to another level. So with this four objective, we thought let's create a model, let's remain transparent, let's remain committed to share value, and let's provide a transparency to all. That was the four objectives.
This is such an innovative approach, isn't it? And more than ever, we really need that transparency right now, giving that confidence back, taking into account those local flavors. The methodology will have a chance to dive into that in more depth in a second. But Bafin, this is a very important question that I'd like to put to you now. How do you ensure that the model is robust?
Okay. So I think a model, what we have done is we spend a lot of time thinking through how we can create a robust model. And the first one was to select the right consultant. So we were talking to many consultants who had a good economic impact team, but we felt with Dalberg that they had a strong Africa experience, they had a strong developmental impact experience, they also had a strong economic team within that. And they have worked with the state and World Bank and all the DFI. So understanding of all four gave us a lot of confidence that Dalberg can be a right partner. So selection of right partner added to the robustness because they're credible, they have done similar work in the past. Second robustness, we thought we don't want a foreign model imposed in Africa. So how we can create a robustness by putting a local country specific economist in the model just to ensure that they provide a triangulation, validation of the model step by step at each stage of the development. Not at the end providing a higher level comment, but they work with Dalberg and make sure that data speaks the national economic language. There is a system. Is there any way we can capture the data differently? Is there any way we can communicate this variable differently? So all those sensitivity of local culture, context, we try to get it through local economist. So we did a study. We worked with government, and we decided that we will have a local economist at each country. And the third aspect, after we developed the model, we decided that it will get certified and validated by third-party independent consultant. So we hired David, who is a global economist. He has reviewed and created many models. So he also was working as a kind of parallel reviewer and approver of the model. So with these three objective and with the last activity to make the model robust, we are sharing this in public domain. We will seek the feedback that comes from all the people who are listening this podcast or streaming, and we will incorporate their feedback as far as possible, and we'll tighten up the model. So that's how we ensure the robustness.
Thank you very much, Bavin. And, talking about having the right consultants, Mais is sitting right next to you, and we'll go to you in a second. But right now, dear ladies and gentlemen, talking about having the right partners, and as we want to take a closer look into this study's methodology and approach, let's now go to Kigali to speak with Boikanyo Motibatsela, who's associate partner at the Dalberg's Kigali office. BK, as many call him, and indeed that makes it easier for me this morning, is a seasoned strategy consultant with a focus on economic development issues, as well as corporate financing and strategy development and execution. BK, hello, welcome.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, and everyone who is online.
Can you send us a little bit of that Kigali sunshine?
I hear it's beautiful in London at this time of year.
Yeah, we're very, very lucky. But that's not going to last. So, BK, can you tell us, how did you manage to develop the right approach and methodology for such a complex topic?
A very good question. And I mean, the starting point is building off something Bhavin was talking about when he says Arise is into building systems, right? Building platforms. So economic activities from special economic zones do not exist in isolation, right? They're rather parts of a supply chain and ancillary services that continuously interact with each other, from production of goods and services between different actors and sectors. So as such, in developing an appropriate economic impact analysis model, we needed to consider both the direct impact of activities in the zone. Those are a bit more straightforward. So, just how much wood has been exported by factory X within the zone, as well as the larger economic impact that's created by the special economic zone. So, for example, that same factory I spoke about that is exporting goods worth X million dollars a year, got logs from particular forestries in Gabon, in this example. Had maybe financial advisors, had transport companies that were bringing it to site, had a glue factory that's providing some of the glue in terms of producing veneer, etc. So there's that consideration around, okay, we needed to understand what is that flow of goods and services, both within the zone and the zone interacting with the broader economy. Having considered that, then we went quite extensively to consult with a number of stakeholders, public, private sector, development sector, to understand, some of the critical questions. What keeps you awake at night? What are we trying to solve for? What do we need to understand? And collated that, falling into 6 key categories. The first critical one was, okay, this model needs to answer the question around what's the national economic impact. So what's the economic value we're adding? What revenues are generated? What exports are generated through the economy as a result of the SEZ's production? And what additional economic value addition, i.e. what additional revenues are induced by actors in the special economic zone through other businesses that exist and supply the zone. The second one, which is a very topical question from the African continent, is the question around labor market outcomes. We all know that Africa is one of the fastest growing continents in terms of not just economy, but one of the fastest growing in terms of population sizes. And there's this increasing need to create employment for an increasingly younger population that is entering the job market. So we critically then started to design around a model that will help us answer the questions on how many jobs are created in the zone as a result of the zone as well, directly, indirectly, and the quality of those jobs. So what level are we talking about? Because it's critically important to not just create jobs for the sake of jobs, but over time realize, upskilling of people in local economies, etc. And importantly, the gender splits around that. So how in what is predominantly the heavily male-oriented industrial sectors have we managed to shift the needle or not, right? And then questions around value addition, so shifting from historic raw material exports to more and more refinement and adding value, and Mays will speak a bit more to that from the Gabon context. The sector diversification we see within the zones, the fiscal impact. So the critical questions around, are we providing support and seeing some sort of fiscal return in terms of taxes generated, social charges that are paid, and then sustainability. The key question around, are we creating sustainable systems here? Are we creating more value from a cubic meter of wood than we were 10 years ago? Are we doing similar in the cotton sector if we're talking about Benin or cashew, etc., and other markets? Having considered, this understanding of how the flows go and what we need to answer for, the methodological approach really rested on three key parts. One was around aggregating data. The second was then applying multipliers to understand the multiplicative effect of these activities, and then assessing that. So looking at the outputs, assessing, triangulating, and seeing what that data is telling us in terms of actual insights. The collecting data is from outputs from the various businesses. It's from self-reporting surveys that we conducted. It was from other reporting that happens through other government agencies. So whether that's from your duties and customs you pay, from exports, etc., collecting that variation of data, applying multipliers. I can give a bit more detail on, but at this level, just taking economic approaches that say, what is the multiplicative effect in specific industries of this kind of activity to understand the broader impact? And then really analyzing in conjunction with our partners such as Mays and other economists, what those outputs were. So really, to answer your question, developing this model started from an understanding of just how the SEZs function and fit within the economy from a flow of goods, services, and funds. Agreeing with critical stakeholders around what the key critical outcomes we need to understand are, so whether that's economic impact, labor, etc., and then going through that careful process of data collection, applying multipliers, assessing and analyzing those outcomes, and refining these programs. But yeah, that would be the brief question around how we approached this critical question.
Thank you very much, BK, and thank you so much as well for mentioning the gender parity question there. And that makes me think about this African saying that says that a bird needs two wings to fly, such as Africa that needs both his women and his men to fly. So, this is such a fast-forward thinking model. Were there any challenges into developing it?
Yeah, we can speak to some of them, and I guess in practice, as Bhavin was saying, around transparency. So in terms of practical realities around developing a model, the foundation of the impact analysis and any kind of impact analysis that one conduct is the availability and the quality of data. That's a key foundation. And as you can imagine, in some of the markets in which we operate, there are some challenges around data. But we managed to look at ways to resolve this. So this is where most time, resources, analysis was spent. Our teams went on ground into the markets, Benin, Togo, Gabon, spending extensive time consulting with actors in the zones, collating data firsthand, and where it might not have been digitally available at first, as well as going and having discussions with various stakeholders, so a number of government ministries, statistics offices, etc., to collate varied information that would then be able to triangulate. So significant amount of effort really put into that data collection, both from a digital and manual process, and cross-checking and understanding the nuances behind it. Through this process, we've created a methodology within which this becomes easier, for lack of a better word, and more replicable going forward. But then also use these extensive consultations to make judgment calls, to understand what is a job. What do we consider a job in certain markets? Are you talking about FTEs? Are you talking about different measures of that? How do we understand questions around fiscal impact, etc.? Then we did a lot of just reviewing data for reliability and reasonableness. So there's another challenge that you need to make, where at times you might have some discrepancies in some of the data you collect. But with the help of various stakeholders, as well as local economists we had, such as Mays, who's sitting with you, managed to really drill down and really test reliability, reasonableness, what works. And then the third I might mention is then really around this question around multipliers. So while the concept of using economic multipliers is quite broadly accepted within the impact world, within economic analysis, many of our markets do not regularly produce these sets of input-output tables, as one might describe them. So, one of the more well-founded ways in which we approach this is to use what's called input-output tables. But where those are not available, we actually engaged with government departments to build some partial economic impact models. We then sourced well-founded secondary data that had comparable markets within which we could use as a base to then adjust those for reasonableness, to arrive at a set of economic impact multipliers that could be used for purposes of not just this study, but similar markets as well, that Arise and others will go into to build special economic zones.
So BK,
but those were the key kind of challenges you find around availability of data, availability of economic impact multipliers, and kind of the approaches taken to refine, adjust, and build for a continuation of this model and further in future, by developing some of these models, by providing advice on them, by using comparables, by just being on market and gathering data and really getting some ground under the fingernails, as some would say.
BK, thank you so much for giving us so much information to understand this topic better. I'm sure that a lot of us want to know what are some of the results, what is the direct impact of this model?
Okay. So in terms of the direct impacts of the model, and then I can talk to some of the outputs that we've seen. Firstly, I would mention that the model, in terms of impact, allows for quantitative and qualitative assessment of the impact of the zones going forward. Not just this zone, but other zones going forward. As Bhavin spoke to this, it answers some critical questions that are often asked and recur over time. What is the impact? Why do we continue to provide certain support, etc.? It helps to provide some comfort, I would say, through the development of the model and the transparency around it. Particularly to nations that have limited or concentrated resources that are considering going down this path, that actually sticking to the bigger industrialization journey can build bigger economies, can build a bigger fiscal base, can create higher quality jobs through the example that we've seen by going through this process through a market such as Gabon. It has helped to streamline the process for calculating impact. And I'll say those are some of the key impact of the model, so to say. When we look at Gabon specifically, and in terms of some of the impact that we've seen in Gabon, there's key outputs. We're seeing that the Nkok zone by itself was already seeing over $400 million a year in export revenues. We're seeing over $360 million in additional economic value added beyond the zone. Over 17,000 jobs created. And those are some of the key impacts that we're seeing.
Thank you very much, Vicky. We'll go back to you in a short while. But now that we are on the topic of Gabon, this is the perfect introduction for Mais Mouissi. And Bavin, right at the top of our session, mentioned how important it is to find the right consultants, to find the right consultant that understands the specificity of each country. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Mais Mouissi, Chief Economist. Mais is one of the most prolific economists on the continent, having conducted several macroeconomic and sectoral studies. He has worked extensively with economic operators and business leaders in Gabon, but not only just Gabon, in the whole sub-region, and has provided his expertise to various international organizations, such as the African Transnational Research Center and EY. Mais, welcome.
Thank you.
So, Mais, what makes this model so unique?
I think I consider this model unique because for the first time we will have in the same place all information regarding the economic impact, social impact, fiscal impact, and sustainability impact. I think it is the first time, not only for the special economic zone, but those information, we need those information. We have so many questions regarding those impact. And for the first time, we have a platform where everybody can see those data. I also consider this model as unique because it is also a model of transparency in Africa. Everybody knows, Bavin said that, BK also, everybody knows that it is very difficult to have transparency, to have regular data in Africa. And we have, with this model, the ability to have a free access to all data used to build the model. And it is very, very important. Everybody could see the data, verify, challenge, and everybody could help to try to give us a feedback to improve the model. Second one, I also think that it is the first time we will have a SEZ model built locally to assess the global economic impact of the SEZ development in different countries. We have so many special economic zones in Africa. We need information on impact. We tried with 3 special economic zones. Maybe we will do more in the next year, but we have a sample of what we can do regarding the impact of those economic zones in the country where those economic zones are based. And the third one, I think that we have a model, and this model has the ability to be enriched over time. And it is very important because each year we will have the ability to compare, to assess the progress. And I think that could be very useful for the economic community, but also for each stakeholders on those subjects.
Thank you very much. And before going further, I want to mention that, we've said this, since the beginning of our session, that details will be available to all of you for recommendations, suggestions, comments, questions. And you'll be able to find more information on www.arise.iip, that's one word.com, and more on that in a second. But Mais, as we've mentioned, Africa is not a country. It's 54 countries. Each country has their specificity. So for you as a Gabonese working on the ground, what were the challenges that you faced, and how did you manage to take into account that Gabonese context?
As African economists and as Gabonese economists, we have the same difficulty, the quality of data, the difficulty to have access to relevant data when we need to work on a model or other economic studies. And it is a big challenge for African economists and also for stakeholders. And regarding what we did with Dalberg, the other difficulty was to try to take in account all Gabonese specificity in a global model like the model we built with Arise and with Dalberg. And we give an answer. And our answer was, as Bavin said, to involve each stakeholder at each step of the project, use each data, challenge each data, and also give the result. We start to do this today, but we will continue give the result of the using of the different data to the stakeholder, because we need to create a partnership between the different stakeholders, the government, but also the industrials in the special economic zone, also the organization like IMF, bankers, etc., to have a global view of what we can do with this model and how this model could impact the global interaction between the different stakeholders in the project.
So a lot of transparency, like you've mentioned as well, Bavin. And so Mais, I would like to ask you, what are some of the steps that you used to validate the methodology of this study, particularly in Gabon, your country?
Yes, that's a very good question. And I think the validation step, it is a very important step in a model, but in economic study in general. Okay. First one, we decided to capture directly each data directly with the stakeholder in the country. And the team go to see each stakeholder, work with them. We take a lot of days to do that, to collect data directly. Second one, we decided to challenge each data collected. We compare with national data, we compare with regional data to have a global consistency of the data. After that, we decided to put in place 3 levels of validation: a local validation, a regional validation, an international validation, because we wanted to have a global sustainability of what we did regarding data, regarding the quality of data. And the last one, not the least, we made some control to ensure that the model is robust. And we did that, and after that, I think we have a model. Maybe we can improve the model, but I think we have a global, robust model we can use and try to duplicate in other special economic zones in Africa.
So a very impressive amount of work there and very robust research as well. I would also like to ask you, why do you think it was so important for the methodology of this economic model to be validated by an independent economist?
I think that Arise is not an economist firm. Dalberg is a customer, a supplier of Arise. And I think that if we have just a relationship between Dalberg and Arise to create a model, that does not make sense. It is very important to have a third party, independent, transparent, with a link to the ground locally to validate the figure. Because regarding Gabon, for example, Dalberg is a foreign firm. I don't think that Dalberg has all skill to understand the local context. It is very important to use the local context when we want to work in one country. And I think the local economists helped to do that, but it was also an independent third parties in the project. No contract with Arise, a link with Dalberg, and we try to make a very important work, very independent work to ensure the quality and the durability of the model.
You know, at the end of the day, nobody knows their home better than the owner. So this is pretty much what you are saying here. You mentioned, you know, that this model could be replicated elsewhere. And I now take the opportunity to go back to you, BK, to ask you, is this model indeed replicable elsewhere, and how will that look like?
Yes, Anna-Marie, I think that was a critical element that we discussed with Arise and built towards. So the way in which the model is built, it's built to have the broader framework that's replicable across other markets and future markets that come, with some tweaks that will need to be made and some refinements for the particular market idiosyncrasies. To give you a practical example, the model will have a way at looking at how we've gone deeper into creating value in a value chain for specific sectors. In Gabon, one of the key sectors is wood, and we consider from year to year what relative value are we extracting from different stages of wood transformation. Logs have now been banned, but whether we are talking about veneer, plywood, right up to actually furniture. The model in terms of structure can do that in other markets, but for different sectors. So we might then have in a Benin or a Togo then a different discussion around from the same basics of the framework and the wiring, how are we extracting greater value from different stages of cotton processing? So whether we're growing cotton, we have fibers, textiles, or ultimately actually just exporting clothes. And you can see how that wiring is similar. But the inputs that come in and some of the nuances that are done on the back end on relative value from each are adjusted for. But to your question, yes, built to be replicable across numerous markets and for different special economic zones, with a consistency in answering some of the critical questions that we spoke about.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to mention that this was also a question sent by a member of our audience. So I hope that you're satisfied with BK's answer there. BK, this looks like the right moment to ask you, in fact, what are the key takeaways from this study? Okay.
So we can just touch on a little bit and the audience can see the screen behind you. One of the key takeaways, and I'll talk to outputs and then a bit of the model is, one of the key takeaways has been, we've seen the growth in a market like Gabon. We've seen the impact come through. What you see, for example, in front of you is a question around revenue generation and how that has grown year by year. This is, for the audience sake, for me to orient you, this is a snapshot of what interacting with the model kind of looks like. So you'd be able to click through the different categories and look at the different forms of data you want to look at. But we see that rise, we see that increase, like in revenues here, for example, to over $400 million a year, with some key drivers behind that. One, in terms of volumes that are being pushed through, but critically as well in terms of value for some of the critical sectors. So as I mentioned, the different stages of wood processing, seeing more and more higher value sort of exports happening, and that growing over time. So we've seen that impressive kind of economic growth over time and economic impact. We can go to the next slide and I'll just touch on the key items. Sorry, next slide after that. So then, for example, then if we consider the question around what are we seeing from a jobs perspective, right? We are seeing a growth in number of jobs. In front of you see the direct jobs, which is just under 10,000 direct jobs. In terms of total jobs created directly and indirectly, including multipliers, that figure goes up to about 17,000, making the special economic zone actually a significant employer, right? Directly or indirectly engaging just under 2% of the national labor workforce. That number is even more concentrated when we delve into specific sectors. But that's kind of what we're seeing from a jobs perspective, and that can be broken down into types of jobs. And then maybe the third one and the last one to touch on is this one around fiscal impact, which is on the next slide. And here, there's this critical question around, as we all understand, there are significant tax breaks that are offered, but we do see tax collections that would probably not have been realized pre-special economic zone in different forms. So one is actually just social charges that are generated, payroll taxes, etc. We see duties, and then we also see some level, and over time that grows, of taxes generated even from businesses that are not located in the special economic zone, but are indirectly having their revenues raised. So when we consider that additional economic value that's created in the economy, that is actually a fiscal base in and of itself. I thought it would be helpful to talk about that from the Gabon impact and just leaning in from what Mays was saying. But then, to touch on some of the other takeaways, as mentioned earlier, this question around streamlining the process for calculating impact. So beyond the impact we see on our screens now, I really want to touch on that critical aspect, and Mays was also speaking to it, around going through this modeling process and actually having a critical takeaway, that is, we can actually streamline the process and create a methodology that's shareable for calculating, understanding, assessing, and making informed decisions around the sort of impact that especially economic zones are having. That we have built, to the first question you actually asked, a key takeaway, a model that is bespoke and customized, but actually is replicable. It is in and of itself a key takeaway in my mind. And then importantly, just the transparency we keep talking about, and how that provides certain comforts in markets and allows certain decisions to be made. Those would be some of the key takeaways I would point to.
Thank you very much, BK, for giving us such a detailed answer there. That's very, very appreciated, in fact. And I think, the question that's on everybody's lips and minds right now is probably, what are the next steps? Where do we go from here, Bhavin?
So I think in terms of developing model, this is maybe we can consider it as a last step where we want to share and disclose this model. Parallel to this, what we have done is we have created our web-based portal, which BK has recently showed. We are going to host that on Arise website so that everybody can see the impact created by our SEZ. So that is a next step. Then what we are planning to do, as BK has mentioned, that we will adjust the model based on the commodity that we are transforming, and tweak the model for each commodity in each country in that we are doing an SEZ. Annually, we will collect the fresh set of data and update the data set and disclose again. So it is a continuous journey. Year by year, we will collect the new data. Parallelly, we will also try to create a system how we can aggregate all the data, work towards digitalization, and see that data comes automatically. Currently, there is a lot of manual intervention required to capture the data, but over a period of time, we want to link this model with the digital technology, with the national economic reporting system, and make sure the data feeds itself and the model runs on autopilot mode. So that's a plan. And we will take the feedback after this event. And if we feel the need, we will adjust the model. And then finally, we will disclose the model. So these are the next steps.
And that is so impressive, actually, to really take what you have to say into account to go further and to improve the model. This is a model, indeed, the ball has been set rolling, but this is an ongoing discussion, this is an ongoing research. And like we've said from the beginning, we want to hear from you. And as promised, here is one of your questions. To what extent can this model be used to feed ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance reporting? And BK, I'd like to take this question to you, please. Would you like me to repeat it?
Thank you very much. Please do repeat it.
Sure. To what extent can this model be used to feed ESG reporting?
Okay. So I can speak to that briefly. There are some elements. I know ESG reporting, and Bhavin knows this well, is quite complex. So there are some elements that can be covered, some other elements that cannot. But there is a section in the model that's dedicated just particularly to the question around sustainability. So the S is probably where I would say we would focus more on, where we explore a number of different dynamics, right, around the sustainability of these. So to that degree, I'd say from the broader ESG reporting, there is functionality within the model for collection, tracking, and reporting of the sustainability aspects of the special economic zones. I hope that's a clear and transparent enough answer around the ESG.
Thank you, and I think Bhavin.
Yeah. So I think in addition to sustainability data that can be captured through model, also important aspect of ESG reporting is the disclosure of direct and indirect jobs and trickle-down economic benefits. So those data I've seen by spending 15 years in industry, there is no one agreed formula. There is no consistent reporting. At EIA stage, company does the speculations of direct and indirect job. There is no way to track the real employment data during the operation of the business. I think this model will add to the quality and accuracy of the direct and indirect job creation. And that is very, very important because I think historically SEZs are been criticized of over-promising and under-delivery. This is something which will give some kind of confident data representation of direct and indirect jobs.
Thank you. And this almost brings us to the end of our discussion. But I would like to ask you all, Bhavin, I'll go back to you straight away. What are your 3 key words that you would like us all to remember today?
Transparency, bespoke and local, and innovation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Mais, I'll ask you the same question as well. What do we need to remember today from our discussion?
Maybe let me add something. We have a worldwide initiative called Publish What You Paid. It is an initiative regarding the extractive industry. In this model, we have the possibility to see the publication of what each company paid regarding tax. And I think it is very important. It is a very important disclosure because David said the first word was transparency. I also think that transparency is the key word because we have here a very important step to go to the global transparency. I think it is very important because everybody could verify the fiscal contribution of each company. I also think that the second word is hope. Hope because I consider special economic zone are project in development. Also in Gabon, I know the maturity of project in Gabon is important, but we continue to develop the special economic zone in Gabon. And I consider that hope is a very important keyword because we need, with the special economic zone, to create more employment, more tax, and more impact on the GDP. Because I think that the future is Africa is in the industrialization, and the special economic zone are a very important part of that. And the third word is continuity. We need to maintain the model. It is very important. Sometimes we made the one shot. We made something and after that nothing. I think we need to continue because I consider that it is important for Arise, but not only for you. It is important for everybody. We are many stakeholders in this project. we need to use that, not for only for ESA, but also for other study to assess. And I think that we need to have a continuity in this project. That's my definitively my final words.
Fantastic. So I remember transparency. Africa definitely needs it. Hope, we certainly need it, especially with those demographic rates, as BK mentioned, going up the roof. And BK, final 3 words for you, for us to remember today?
That's a tough one. It's a difficult one to follow, so sometimes it's
by the way, this was not planned.
Yeah, I think first word I'd go for is impact. And this is to think about impact over output. It's one thing to say, what are the outputs? What do we see as numbers? And evolve that from impact. So it's to continuously keep thinking around the impact. What we're looking to do in these economies, what we're looking to understand, why we even built these models to drive decisions is to ultimately have impact. So that is one word, output. The second output is one that has been repeated a couple of times now, is the transparency, the idea of being transparent, the idea of sharing, and the idea of adding to the knowledge base in the way in which we operate as a continent. And then the last one is quite similar to what May said, it's consistency, which relates a bit to, in 2 parts. One, from a model perspective, the continuity, the consistency and updating and continuing to track and continuing to refine. And also a key learning around the consistency and commitment to the industrialization journey takes time, but the impact is ultimately felt. Those would be my 3 words.
Thank you very much. And on the topic of transparency, of continuity, I'd like to remind you all that more information on this study can be found on Arise's website, which is www.ariseiip, that's one word.com. And there you'll be able to deep dive even further into everything that we've discussed here today. You'll also be able to study in more details this unique study, make your recommendations, suggestions, and as you've heard, everything, absolutely everything will be taken into account, which is incredible, quite frankly. And you'll be able to do so by going to the Contact Us section, and the team will make sure to respond and react. So this brings us to the end of this very fascinating discussion today about such a trailblazing study. So I invite you all to go on that Arise website to keep yourself informed. And for me and Marie, thank you very much. I would like, of course, to thank BK joining us from Kigali, and of course, Bavis and Mais. Merci beaucoup. Thank you all. And I hope to see you soon, and keep yourself informed on that exceptional study. Goodbye.